The greatest problem facing American agriculture today is the rapidly waning fertility of our soil. Since the beginning of farming on this great continent, man has been busily engaged in exploiting the natural resources of the soil. Everything was taken out, nothing put back in. When the best soil of a territory had been exhausted, the men moved on to new fields. Today, there are no more virgin fields to exploit, and we are beginning to reap the ill rewards of our short-sighted farm methods. Every season, millions of tons of valuable topsoil are blown away in dust storms, leaving bare fields and desolation over rapidly increasing areas. Floods wash off many more millions of tons. The Mississippi River alone carries away over 300 million tons each year. The total losses from such floods reach staggering proportions in soil alone, to say nothing of property damage and even life. Added to all this, drought is apparently on the increase over a large portion of the continent. What is the answer? Well, let's take a quick glance at the whole picture. Originally, the eastern half of this continent was covered almost entirely by a heavy forest growth. When cut down and cleared, this left a deep sponge-like soil composed of decayed vegetation, roots, and absorbent material. Rain falling on this soil found its way quickly into the ground with little or no runoff or erosion. The plains country of the West in those early days was covered with luxuriant grass, which formed a thick, thirsty sponge on top of the earth. Rains were quickly absorbed by the billions of tiny hair-like roots that literally covered the entire surface of the West. Roots whose winding, matting threads went down to amazing depths into the ground. The University of Saskatchewan excavated and entirely washed out complete roots on various plains grasses, and believe it or not, a single plant of crested wheatgrass had roots that went down to a depth of 90 inches, and there were over 300 miles of them on the one plant. And here's another of those amazing grasses, brome, a single plant. Now multiply the roots on this one plant by the millions of plants on an acre, and you see why we say sponge. As time went on, this vast expanse of matted sponge was quickly broken and planted to grains and other soil-depleting crops. After years of intensive cultivation, this maze of fine hair-like roots that went so deep were completely destroyed. Here's an illustration of water action in soil. A prominent Midwestern university recently sprinkled 3 inches of rainfall on a thoroughly cultivated plot of corn, and an equal amount on a plot of native grass. The soil was similar, both on a 5% slope. The cornfield absorbed only 30% of the water, and the balance which ran off carried 8 tons of topsoil per acre with it. The grass plot absorbed 99% of the water and had no erosion. And it works both ways. Native grasses with their enormous root growth have a peculiar ability to keep the soil structure granular, allowing easy movement of surface and subsurface moisture. Strange as it may seem, the very condition, shortage of roots and organic matter in cultivated soil, that causes our dust storms and droughts in the semi-arid territories also causes enormous water erosion in the more humid sections. The rains that cannot be absorbed by the soil run off, carrying topsoil along with them. Those parallel ridges were once corn rows. Earth alone cannot grow crops, but whether it be clay, sand, or any of the intermediate soils, it must contain moisture and humus, or decaying organic matter, before plant growth can be possible. Continual cropping and cultivating have depleted the humus and reduced the structure on much of our soil to the consistency of talcum powder. Water cannot penetrate soil of this nature, and every wind takes its toll. Listing does leave the land in ridges that help hold the soil, and furrows will hold some of the water, but this is not the real cure. Basin listing is another method that is helping to keep the moisture where it falls. Here the land is ridged and furrowed, and dams are built in the furrows to hold water that would otherwise run and cause erosion. Again, the method helps, but it does not supply the cure that is so desperately needed. The real answer lies in 2 things. First, the elimination of practices that contribute to erosion, and second, the growing of crops that will supply the sponge needed. Straw pile burning, for example, should be stopped. It has contributed in no small degree to the present condition. Straw contains 40% of the plant food material that produced the crop, and plowed down, it tends to stabilize the soil and retard washing and blowing. It also helps absorb moisture and makes organic matter. Obviously, grass crops are valuable as a source of food for livestock, but overgrazing is one of the important factors that has destroyed millions of acres. Intelligent grazing practices should be maintained. Overgrazing causes untold damage to the sponge that should protect the land. Unfortunately, our soil-depleting crops up till now have been our cash crops: grains, corn, cotton, tobacco, potatoes, and truck crops. Each of these take out of the ground considerably more than they can possibly return. They leave the fields deficient in minerals and organic matter called humus, and do not have the fine hair-like root structure that holds the soil and absorbs moisture. Now, cash crops can be soil-building and soil-holding crops. They can be crops that will return in actual money as much and usually more than the soil-depleting crops, and they will build up and hold the soil. Let's see how. Soil conservation programs are now nationwide and called for intelligent crop rotation that will restore the soil, at least in part, to its original condition. Better rotation with grasses and legumes, terracing and contour farming on the rolling land. On the long slopes, strip cropping with rows of grasses, clovers, or hay between the cultivated crops is being recommended with excellent results. The grass and hay crops catch the water that runs off the tilled fields. In all areas, a thorough analysis of the fields is recommended, and limestone and mineral fertilizer is being applied wherever necessary. This work has been found to pay large dividends. To further build up soils, the plowing down of barnyard manure that has been evenly spread on the fields is being practiced. This, too, brings profitable results. Farmers are beginning to realize that losses often result from manure that is piled instead of spread. The piling method is now being rapidly eliminated. Another result-producing method to help the soil is the plowing down of green manure and vegetative crops to make humus or organic matter. Even a crop of weeds plowed down in this manner improves the absorbent quality of the soil and prevents blowing and washing. And finally, farmers are now growing crops that will not only hold and build up the soil, but which will return to the owner a good profit at the same time. Let's look at a few of these and see for ourselves. Here's a field of Cerisa lespedeza in western Tennessee, in a district where erosion and gullying are a real problem. Just across the road from this fine field is a scene that tells a sad story of poor crop practices. The Cerisa field had started to gully badly, but stopped immediately once the growth started, and no wonder. Have a look at these roots. They go down to great depths, and there are millions of them, holding the clump of earth so tightly you can hardly break off portions. And every one of these millions of both coarse and fine roots has its quota of nodules of nitrogen, which build up the soil. Add to this the thick vegetative covering, and you have a soil builder of unequaled ability. But that tells only half the story of this Tennessee farmer's success. First, erosion was checked with this long-rooted crop. The soil was built up and stabilized. And finally, by letting the crop mature for seed and harvesting in this manner, the owner received over $100 an acre for seed alone. A new and profitable yield from an old field. Here's a grass that is doing a fine job in the Middle West, brome, in one of its many varieties. A Nebraska grower reports a seed crop that netted him over $60 an acre when harvested in this manner. What better crop can you grow? And for the Northwest and the high plains, crested wheatgrass promises big things. It's a dry land grass that goes down as deep as the old prairie wool and has enormous root structure that smothers weeds and resists drought. Also, it can be seeded with an ordinary grain drill and yields from 1 to 800 pounds of seed per acre when harvested in this manner. Seed that will bring 40 cents a pound, another new and profitable yield from an old field. And there are scores of others. Crops of this kind not only bring new yields from old fields, they increase the yields for years to come, because they bring back to the soil that indispensable mixture of roots, organic matter, and humus on which plants thrive. They tie the soil together and allow the moisture to get down into the ground, where it becomes the lifeblood of profitable crops. Heretofore, grasses have always been regarded as a pasture crop on which the only cash income was from livestock. No longer does this idea hold true. Today, the majority of grasses yield a seed crop of real cash value. Kentucky bluegrass, for example, easily pays out more in seed than a grain crop. Second only to bluegrass as a pasture crop is red-top grass, which grows from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. Its most unusual feature is that while it's strongly drought-resistant, still it thrives well in wet, boggy land. And whether in a wet or dry territory, red top is an excellent soil holder, being able to resist erosion, even in gullies and drain outlets. The seed, though light and fluffy, is easy to save in this manner, and it's doggone profitable. Johnson grass has long been known as a curse of the cotton field. But thanks to the experiments of the Soil Conservation Program, Johnson grass has been proven valuable. Today it's being used to save these same cotton fields from erosion and gullying. This Texas grower is also realizing a nice profit from the seed crop. By plowing immediately after seed harvest, he has no trouble with root growth. Profits and soil improvement from a weed crop. An important pasture grass in the South now is Bermuda grass. The seed, which is mostly sold back to the South and the East, brings around 30 cents a pound, and each acre yields several hundred pounds. Bermuda grass makes a splendid sod for pastures and lawns. It resists drought and heat and holds the soil together when seeded on the water outlets of terraces. Here's a hay crop of real merit that has been grown all over the Middle West for years, timothy. Though it does not provide as tough a sod as some of the other grasses, the roots go down quite deep, helping to rebuild soil structure. Also, timothy has a tendency to loosen the soil, making it much more absorbent. Lately, the seed crop, which is easy to harvest, has proven much more profitable than the hay. Rhodes grass is a fine hay of the South. Up until just recently, however, the seed, which is worth 60 cents per pound, was imported from Australia. For that reason, the experience of this Texas grower is quite an example of new yields from old fields. He planted Rhodes grass to build up this soil. In return, he got $2 an acre for soil conserving and $40 an acre for the seed. And canary grass is another about which you can tell almost the same facts. It's called the alfalfa of the lowlands because it will grow in sour, boggy soil that formerly produced nothing but coarse marsh hay and cattails. On such wasteland, this Wisconsin grower really achieved profitable yields with canary grass. He produced 4 tons of good hay, 100 pounds of seed to the acre. Of course, the real soil builders are the legumes. Many have root structures that approximate those of the grasses. But in addition, legumes are nitrogen-gathering plants. When properly inoculated, they absorb more of this material from the air than they can possibly use. As a result, the surplus nitrogen is left in the ground to improve the fertility and development of succeeding crops. Common red clover, an excellent hay crop all over the Middle West, is typical of the soil improvement and profits that are possible with practically all of the legumes. One crop is estimated as being equivalent to 17 loads of manure to the acre in soil building value alone. On the first cut, it yields a fine crop of hay. Then on the second cutting, a seed crop worth anywhere from $20 to $60 to the acre. The aristocrat of all the clovers is Mammoth English, grown mostly in the southern Midwest. Here is a legume that produces an enormous crop of hay. If harvested for seed, with the straw and chaff scattered and plowed down, it has a mammoth soil-building value. The straw and chaff contain a high percentage of minerals that are essential to promoting quick, active growth. The king of soil builders is sweet clover. With sufficient lime, it will grow anywhere. Like mammoth clover, it makes an enormous growth. And when plowed down for green manure, it rebuilds worn-out soil at an unusually fast pace. This is a result of the huge root structure, which decays quickly, leaving the soil in excellent condition to absorb all the moisture. The crop is profitable for its seed also, and when harvested in this manner, the straw can be plowed down. Thus you secure all the soil-building benefits and harvest a good cash crop as well. Alsike, or poor land clover, grows on soils that will not produce red or mammoth clover. For such exhausted and eroded territories, Alsike is a remarkable soil builder. Invariably, the crop that follows shows an incredible improvement over previous results. But Alsike is also a profitable seed crop in itself. Typical yields from many different farms show averages of from 4 to 12 bushels per acre, and it pays all the way from $10 per bushel up. Here's a southern winter crop that keeps the soil covered during the wet season, crimson clover. Like most of the legumes, crimson clover is a high nitrogen-producing growth with an excellent root structure. Like the others, too, it yields a worthwhile seed crop, more profitable than a grain crop. Repeated tests demonstrate that crimson clover increases soil fertility from 25 to 100% for following crops. New yields from old fields brings us an interesting story concerning Hugh Bam's sweet clover, an annual legume. When he saw the wiry, tangled mess which Hugh Bam presents when full grown, the owner of this California farm gave up the job of harvesting it. The man on the old crop, however, stepped in and made a deal to harvest for the seed. He made a nice fat profit for himself out of an abandoned crop. Alfalfa, our most valuable hay crop, has been harvested for seed in only a few sections of the country, largely because it was difficult to harvest. Today, however, hundreds of growers report substantial seed profits and an easy harvest when the all crop is used for the job. One grower secured 12 bushels per acre, and it brings $20 a bushel. Another legume crop that had gone out of fashion because of harvest difficulties was the field pea. Now it's easy to harvest. A crop of vegetable peas today brings a good return, and following crops improve as a result of the soil-building materials left by the field pea. New yields from old fields. That's the plan to follow for present profits and for future security. The Austrian winter pea has long been a soil-building favorite in the South. Lately, the northern farmer has discovered that he can also use it as a spring crop. In North Dakota, it's being used as a cash crop in rotation with potatoes. Each following year, the potatoes are greatly improved because of the high nitrogen content of the Austrian pea, together with the plowing down of all chaff and straw. The seed crop is as valuable as a grain. Vetch, in some of its forms, is becoming a most popular soil builder through the South. Planted on the cotton middles in the fall, it covers the ground within a short time. It can be plowed down in spring to increase enormously the cotton yield, or it may be allowed to mature and harvested for seed. Though the crop ripens unevenly, it's easy to save. Straw and chaff go back into the field, helping in no small degree toward rebuilding tight and worn-out soil. Korean Lespedeza, soil builder and soil saver. Yes, it's both. Fine hair-like roots descend deeply into the soil, spreading and building a firm, threaded mat that is virtually as luxuriant as that supplied by grass roots. Each of the root stems carries valuable nitrogen materials down to where it's most needed. Because Korean Lespedeza will thrive well on acid soils, it's particularly beneficial as a rebuilder of old pasture land. It grows without interfering with the grass. In fact, it actually helps the grass along. Nor will its growth interfere with that of a grain or a cover crop. Seed from Korean Lespedeza runs up to 1,000 pounds per acre, and it's worth up to 20 cents a pound. Do you recognize this crop? That's right, cowpeas, sometimes called whippoorwill peas. It's a fast-growing legume, generally planted after the early summer crops have been harvested. This particular planting followed a crop of crimson clover. You can imagine the soil-building effects of these two crops in one season. The two seed harvests, crimson clover and cowpea, made a mighty profitable year. One of the best-liked soil builders in the southeast is crotalaria. All of the straw, chaff, and residue is plowed under, making humus for soil building. Previously, seed could only be hand-picked. For this reason, it still brings high prices. Harvesting seed in this manner makes a really profitable new crop from an old field. The soybean is probably grown in larger acreages than any other of our legume crops. It's grown, however, mostly as a straight cash crop, and a good one. Its value as a soil builder in the Corn Belt rotation has probably never been given full credit. When used properly, each ensuing corn crop shows definite proof of the soybean's ability to improve soil. Demand for the bean has grown by leaps and bounds, and it's now considered a regular field crop. And there are many other soil-building and soil-improving crops. Over $8 million were paid out for imported grass and legume seeds last year. So there's a real market for seed growers for several years to come. Some of these will fit into your rotation and increase your income. See your county agent or your district soil conservation director. Work with them and get these new yields from your old fields.